Working on my 5-inch gauge Stirling single, and the time has come to start the painting. This is part 1, painting the front wheels. If you watched the episode in my In the Workshop series where I reviewed the Clark parts washer, I used this front bogie from the Stirling single to see how effective the parts washer was, and it's very good. I would think that if I left the part on the bench for a while the solvent would evaporate, but here I'm speeding up the process. And first of all, a couple of serious health and safety notices. When using an airline in the workshop, always wear eye protection, and also if you're blasting solvent from parts, making solvent evaporate quickly, always make sure that you work in a very well ventilated environment. I'm working next to a wide open door. So now all of the solvent has been blown away. On the front bogie stretcher, and yes, that's what it's called, I'm using some 400 grade wet or dry sandpaper to remove the rust. Not that there is much rust on this particular part, but what there is I'm removing with the sandpaper. This engine's been well stored over the years. There's just one area on the wheels where obviously this sat on something damp, but everything else is generally okay. There isn't much paintwork on this engine, most of it's still in brass, but what has been painted quite well. I'm not going to develop this into a major obsessive series, I'll just be doing bits and pieces at it over a period. In this clip you can see some slight corrosion around the rim of the front wheel, but this is easily removed just using some Scotch-Brite. I'm not going to paint these wheels in situ, I'm going to remove them from the bogie frame. Each of the axle boxes is held in place by a keeper, and these are secured to the frame using 2 bolts, which I'm currently removing. That's one side done, so I turn it over to do the other side, followed by repeating the process on the other pair of wheels, and then I have all the keepers in my hand. And look at this, when I hold the keepers in my hand and put long bolts through the holes in the end of them, they all line up perfectly, and it doesn't matter which way round I put them. This is very good engineering. The solvent in the parts washer got rid of most of the oil and grime, but I'm going to go one step further. This stuff is called panel wipe, and it takes degreasing to the next level. It's normally used in the automotive industry for just wiping over the panels prior to painting, but I use it as a general purpose degreaser as well. But there's a really big caution I have to put on this. Watch carefully as I apply the panel wipe to the side of the frames. It evaporates almost immediately, so this means that the panel wipe is going into the atmosphere. So once again, working in a very well ventilated area is recommended. In fact, it's essential for this job for 2 reasons. One is you don't want to be breathing in the fumes because you probably go a bit dizzy and then fall over. And the other reason, which is equally important, this stuff is extremely flammable. As far as I'm aware, this is naphtha, and it's very similar, or at least it smells almost exactly the same, as the lighter fluid that I used to put in my Zippo cigarette lighter when I was a smoker. But I don't do that anymore, and I certainly wouldn't be smoking whilst doing a job like this. I'm using a very high quality paintbrush for this, but it's got quite stiff bristles so it gets into the corners. I need to remove every trace of grease, grime, or any kind of dust or particles still on the metal that I'm going to paint. I'm going to have to be fairly quick with this job because as I'm using this panel wipe, it's evaporating so fast it's starting to empty the plastic tub. So how am I going to approach this painting job? Obviously, as you can see, all of the components are going to be squeaky clean before I paint them. But I'm not going to paint every component just using a paintbrush. I'm going to use Phoenix Precision Paints, and I've initially bought 2 large pots of this. One of the pots of paint contains the green, which is Great Northern Railway's green, and the other pot contains the brown, which is Great Northern Railway's chocolate brown. And the other thing I'm going to do to avoid any runs is I'm going to do it one side at a time. For instance, when I paint the first wheel set, I'm going to paint the inside of the wheel first, then I'm going to turn it over and paint the outside of the wheel. And very shortly you'll see me doing that on the video. The reason for painting one side at a time means I can stand the wheel with the painted surface uppermost and the paint can't run anywhere. I emptied and refilled the plastic tub with some more panel wipe, and once again I'm using it on the side frames of the bogie to get rid of every trace of any particles or anything that's on there. Painting these frames is a bit of an experiment to see how they look. I'm also going to paint these one side at a time so the paint can never run. But first the wheels. And before that, I'm giving the tin a thorough mix because it's been stood on a shelf for quite a while. and when the paint looks like this and it dribbles consistently, then it's ready for use. I'm starting off by painting the inside, and you have to get a system that works for you. Sometimes I dot about. My brain finds it very difficult to concentrate on one thing specifically. It's sort of permanently multitasking on a variety of different things. If you watch this clip carefully, you'll see that I paint the right hand side of the wheel first, and then as I rotate the wheel, I notice some bits that I've missed, so I paint those areas as well. I need to do this fairly quickly so the paint doesn't dry. By doing it this way, I get a really good uniform finish on all of the spokes. Now it's time to paint the visible surface of the wheel. I suppose that if you really wanted, you could paint the inside surface of the wheel very badly, because who's going to see it? But that's not the point. I always try to do it properly, and I need the wheels to look like they've been painted by a man with a brush using coach paint like on the full size. I'm using a small brush for that reason. If I get any brush marks, which really I won't use in this paint because it's excellent, but if I did get any brush marks, there would be scale brush marks. With the miniature steam locomotives that come through the Steam Workshop, and if you watch the Steam Workshop series you can see examples of this, generally speaking, some of the paint that's been brush painted on engines that come into the Steam Workshop is diabolical. It doesn't always follow that competent engineers are good painters and vice versa. So that is the first of the wheels painted. Over now to look at the frames. And as I mentioned earlier, this is Great Northern Railway Chocolate Brown by Phoenix Precision Paints. As I'm painting these frames, I'm moving them around so that they catch the light, and it looks horrible, doesn't it? As you can see, every brush mark is showing. But don't worry, this Phoenix Precision Paint stuff is amazing. Miraculously, if I leave it in this position, it just settles and smooths out and you get a really good finish. And I will show the result of this in the next video. I'm not going to brush paint the entire engine though. I'm going to take some Phoenix Precision Paints to a local company and have them put the paint into aerosols, which will make it really easy to spray the engine. More about this as the series progresses. But for now, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful.